Welcome to another deep dive episode of Inside American Politics by Skoob. I'm your host, Bradley Teller, and today we're peeling back the layers of one of the most disturbing and complex cases of our time. This isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. It's about a web of power, influence, and corruption that stretches from Wall Street to Whitehall, from private islands to the halls of Harvard. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about how power operates behind closed doors. We'll explore the lavish lifestyle that hid unspeakable crimes, the brilliant minds that were collected like trophies, and the shadowy financial empire that somehow continues to generate millions even after its creator's death. Buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride through the dark corridors of elite power. Let me paint you a picture of Jeffrey Epstein's world. Imagine you're stepping into his $56 million 40-room Manhattan mansion that commanded nearly the whole block of 71st Street between 5th and Madison Avenues. But this isn't your typical billionaire's pad. As you walk through the hallway, you're confronted by a row of individually framed artificial eyeballs staring back at you. Look up, and there's a life-size female doll hanging from a chandelier. In the living room, a portrait of Bill Clinton wearing Monica Lewinsky's blue dress dominates the wall. At the bottom of the stairs sits a huge chessboard with customized figurines modeled after suggestively attired members of his staff, what one guest described as hair-raising in its commitment to creeping people the fuck out. This grotesquely vulgar decor wasn't just evidence of untutored taste. It was a statement, a psychological tool, a way of normalizing the abnormal for his high-profile guests. And who were these guests? Former President Bill Clinton, who was so close to Epstein that he often flew on the financier's private Boeing 727, making what were described as humanitarian pit stops in places like Haiti and Rwanda. Harvard superlawyer Alan Dershowitz. Former Commerce Secretary Bill Richardson. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Prince Andrew. All of them loved to fly Air Jeff. The appeal wasn't just the luxury. Epstein wasn't as boring as many hyper-rich businessmen. He purported to be an intellectual with a strong bent for science. Never mind that he dropped out of Cooper Union, never graduated from NYU's Current Institute of Mathematical Sciences, and was fired as a mathematics teacher at the prestigious Upper East Side private school Dalton. Through generous donations, he cultivated strong links with Harvard and MIT. The dinners he convened at his 21,000-square-foot mansion combined money players like Apollo Global Management's Leon Black and billionaire hedge funder Glenn Dubin with big-brained academics like cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker and, as we learned in a 2019 New York Times bombshell, Microsoft founder-turned-philanthropist Bill Gates. But here's the million-dollar question that should have been on everyone's mind. How was Epstein paying for all of this? He promoted an aura of the mysterious master of many universes, but he was, in fact, a money manager who had only one visible client, Ohio retail billionaire Les Wexner, owner of Victoria's Secret and The Limited. One client. Think about that. One client funding a global empire of influence, private jets, multiple mansions, and a Caribbean island. Either Les Wexner was paying Epstein astronomical fees, or there was something else going on entirely. Now let's cross the Atlantic and talk about one of the most intriguing relationships in Epstein's orbit, his bond with Peter Mandelson, the Labour peer and former UK ambassador to Washington. They met in the early 2000s through elite social circles, bonding over politics, power, and Epstein's lavish lifestyle. Mandelson was a key New Labour figure and Blair confidant, and he visited Epstein's Manhattan townhouse multiple times, including dinners where young women mingled freely among the powerful men. Epstein bankrolled trips and causes dear to Mandelson, blurring the lines between friendship and influence. But here's where it gets really disturbing. After Epstein's 2008 Florida plea deal for soliciting a minor, where he served just 13 months with work release, Mandelson didn't distance himself. Instead, he urged Epstein to push for early freedom. Court documents and witness accounts show Mandelson emailing Epstein allies, advising legal fights and rehabilitation claims to shave time off his sentence. "Fight for it," he wrote, according to leaks. This is a man who ignored red flags like nude teen photos found in Epstein's Palm Beach home. Mandelson hosted Epstein at his Mediterranean villa, introducing him to EU bigwigs. Their ties deepened post-conviction. In 2010, Mandelson flew on Epstein's jet from Europe to the US, joining a circle that included Ghislaine Maxwell. Photos capture them at parties, Mandelson grinning amid Epstein's creepy decor, that Clinton portrait, those dangling dolls. Epstein donated to Mandelson-linked charities, securing invites to Davos and UN events. Critics slammed it as reputation laundering. Epstein posed as a science patron, funding Harvard while hiding abuse of over 50 girls aged 14 to 17. When questioned, Mandelson downplayed it as casual acquaintance, but flight logs and texts paint a different picture. He texted Epstein post-jail, "Miss our chats." When Virginia Giuffre sued Maxwell in 2015, naming Prince Andrew, Mandelson stayed publicly silent but privately lobbied friends to back Epstein's denials. Think about this for a moment. Here's a man who helped architect New Labour's spin machine, who understood the power of perception better than almost anyone in British politics. And he's encouraging a convicted pedophile to fight for early release. Why would someone risk their reputation for Jeffrey Epstein unless the relationship ran much deeper than a casual friendship? Another detail that fueled scrutiny was Epstein's infamous 2003 to 2004 birthday book, a leather-bound album compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell and filled with messages from powerful friends. While Mandelson hasn't publicly confirmed contributing to it, his proximity to Epstein during that period and his presence in Maxwell-organized social circles raises questions. Around the same time, Epstein privately described Mandelson to associates as a best pal in Europe, a phrase that underscores how far beyond casual acquaintance their relationship appeared to run, especially given Mandelson's continued contact after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Now we're entering some of the most controversial territory in the Epstein saga. The question of intelligence connections has swirled around this case from the beginning, and the evidence, while circumstantial, is deeply troubling. Let's start with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Between 2013 and 2017, Barak visited Epstein's home in New York about 30 times. 30 times. In one notable trip in 2014, Barak flew with Epstein from Palm Beach to Tampa on Epstein's private jet. What were they discussing? Business? Intelligence? Investments? We may never know, but that's an awful lot of meetings for casual social visits. Then there's Ari Ben-Menashe, a former Israeli intelligence officer who has made several striking claims about Epstein's role in intelligence operations, primarily for Israel's Mossad. According to Ben-Menashe, he was introduced to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in the mid-80s by Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, who had deep ties with Israeli intelligence. Ben-Menashe claims that Epstein and Maxwell were already working with Israeli intelligence at that time, the mid-80s. He described Epstein's entire sex trafficking enterprise as a deliberate honey trap operation, offering sexual encounters with underage girls to powerful individuals as a means to gather compromising material for blackmail on behalf of Mossad. Think about the logic of this for a moment. If you wanted to compromise powerful individuals, politicians, CEOs, royalty, what better way than to provide them with something they couldn't get anywhere else, something deeply illegal, and then document everything? Ben-Menashe also claimed that this network included Robert Maxwell, Daily Mirror editor Nick Davies, and himself, suggesting that Epstein and Maxwell were integrated into continuing Mossad-linked operations stemming from Iran-Contra arms and espionage dealings. Now there are denials. Naftali Bennett, former Israeli Prime Minister, has categorically denied these claims. He stated with 100% certainty that Epstein never worked for Mossad, and that speculation to the contrary is categorically and totally false. But here's the thing about intelligence work. The whole point is that it's supposed to remain secret. Would we expect official confirmation even if it were true? What we do know is that Epstein had an unusual relationship with money, and an even more unusual client base for someone who was supposedly just a money manager. We know he had connections to some of the most powerful intelligence-connected individuals in the world, and we know that his operation had all the hallmarks of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation. Let's step back and examine one of the most fascinating aspects of Epstein's operation, his systematic collection of scientists and intellectuals. As Donald Trump once said about him, "Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, no doubt about it." That quote certainly hasn't aged well, but beautiful women were only part of it. As some collect butterflies, Epstein collected brilliant minds. "I invest in people, be it politics or science. It's what I do," he told friends. His biggest prizes were Stephen Hawking and former President Clinton. In his eyes, Clinton represented the highest evolutionary form of the political animal. Clinton, for his part, described Epstein as both a highly successful financier and a committed philanthropist with a keen sense of global markets and an in-depth knowledge of 21st century science. Now, Epstein wasn't the first rich guy to throw money at scientists. In antiquity, the Medici family sponsored Galileo. In 1911, Belgian industrialist Ernest Solvay organized conferences that gathered figures like Lorentz, Planck, Poincaré, and young Einstein in a single room, probably the most influential conference in scientific history. But the way Epstein did it, blurring the lines between influence, reputation, and access, raises uncomfortable questions we still haven't fully answered. One of Epstein's earliest, closest ties in the science world was with Harvard professor Martin Nowak. In the early 2000s, Epstein gave him about $500,000. When Harvard hired Nowak in 2003, he became director of a new math-driven biology lab, launched with $6.5 million from Epstein's foundation. The two were close. They reportedly visited Epstein's private island together. Nowak once told New York Magazine, "Jeffrey has the mind of a physicist. It's like talking to a colleague in your field." Even after Epstein's 2006 arrest, Harvard declined to return the $6.5 million it had already received. Another key figure was Lawrence Krauss, a theoretical physicist and best-selling author. Even after Epstein's 2008 conviction, Krauss continued to defend him, saying, "As a scientist, I always judge things on empirical evidence, and he always has women ages 19 to 23 around him, but I've never seen anything else. So as a scientist, my presumption is that whatever the problems were, I would believe him over other people. I don't feel tarnished in any way by my relationship with Jeffrey. I feel raised by it." That's a stunning statement from a supposedly rational scientist. I feel raised by it. What kind of hold did Epstein have over these brilliant minds that they would continue to defend him even after his conviction? Now let's follow the money, because this is where things get really strange. 2 days before Epstein died in his Manhattan jail cell, he moved $577 million into something called the 1953 Trust. That $577 million eventually moved all the way down to $40 million. But here's the kicker. Just recently, in January 2025, the estate received another $112 million in a tax refund. The money is back up to $145 million. Why is money still moving around in such massive amounts years after Epstein's death? The key players managing this shadowy fortune are attorney Darren Indyke and accountant Richard Kahn, with Boris Nikolic as backup. Nikolic's background adds another layer of weirdness to this whole saga. Let's talk about what investigators found when they searched Epstein's properties. In the New York mansion, 170 hidden cameras throughout the property and a fake Austrian passport. At the Palm Beach property, hundreds of nude or suggestive photos. Someone might say this guy just had a fetish, but then there's the Paris property with dozens of photographs of underage girls, plus electronic media including CDs and hard drives. But the New Mexico property, the Zorro Ranch in Stanley covering 8,000 acres, that's where things get truly bizarre. They found a cabin-style guest lodge in the desert, speculated to be used for isolating guests or girls. There was an airstrip and helipad for discreet air travel. But here's the really disturbing part. There was allegedly a secret underground structure or bunker. According to the New York Times, Epstein used this ranch for eugenics and genetic experiments, including interests in transhumanism and, get this, seeding the human race with Epstein's DNA. Seeding the human race with Epstein's DNA. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't just about sexual gratification or even blackmail. This was about some kind of twisted vision of genetic legacy. Epstein had attempted to ingratiate himself with Los Alamos National Laboratory scientists and transhumanist researchers, possibly leveraging the ranch as a hub for influence or experimentation. When you look at all this evidence, the hidden cameras, the genetic experiments, the scientific connections, the intelligence ties, it becomes clear that we're dealing with something far more complex than just a wealthy pedophile with powerful friends. Let's trace Epstein's remarkable rise through the financial world, because understanding how he gained his power helps us understand how he maintained it for so long. Epstein made a swift climb up the Bear Stearns hierarchy, becoming a limited partner after just 4 years in 1980. He advised the bank's wealthiest clients on tax mitigation strategies, but he also violated Regulation D of the SEC, a serious offense that somehow didn't derail his career. After leaving Bear Stearns, he joined Tower Financial Corporation, which imploded as one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history, losing investors over $800 million in today's money. Again, Epstein seemed to emerge unscathed. By 1991, Leslie Wexner, chairman and CEO of L Brands, with flagship companies Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie & Fitch, Express Bath & Body Works, granted Epstein full power of attorney over his affairs. Think about that. Full power of attorney. This gave Epstein unprecedented control over a retail empire worth billions. Maria Farmer has filed a sworn affidavit in federal court in New York, alleging that Leslie Wexner sexually assaulted her in the summer of 1996. This suggests that Wexner wasn't just Epstein's client. He may have been a fellow predator. Epstein attended Victoria's Secret fashion shows, hosted the models at his New York City home, and helped aspiring models get work with the company. He became fluent in offshore tax havens, reducing federal income taxes by 90% while being part of the U.S. banking system. But here's what's really puzzling. Where are Epstein's financial and trading records? His SEC filings, his taxes? What was the actual source of his wealth? For someone who claimed to be a brilliant financier, there's remarkably little evidence of actual trading or investment activity. In 2005, evidence of pedophilia came to the surface, which quickly avalanched into 50-plus women with basically the same story against one guy. Anyone else would have been finished for life, but not Epstein. His lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, who Virginia Roberts claims she was trafficked to at least 6 times, the earliest when she was 16, helped negotiate what can only be described as the deal of a lifetime. Epstein ended up only pleading guilty to a state charge of procuring for prostitution a girl below age 18. How did our justice system produce such a careless result? Alexander Acosta, then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, later said he offered the lenient plea deal because he was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence, was above his pay grade, and to leave it alone. To put this in perspective, after more than 100 women made public allegations against Harvey Weinstein, he was found guilty and sentenced to 23 years in prison. Guess what? Alan Dershowitz was on his legal team too. Listen to these quotes from Dershowitz. "The defendant wants to hide the truth because he's generally guilty. The defense attorney's job is to make sure the jury does not arrive at that truth." And another, "Judges are the weakest link in our system of justice." This is the man who helped Epstein escape justice for over a decade. As we close this deep dive into the Epstein case, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This story was never just about one man. It exposed a system where power shields itself, where justice bends for the connected, and where money can silence institutions meant to uphold truth. Epstein's deals, his access, and the protection he received weren't accidents. They were symptoms of how influence really works at the top. The hidden cameras, the elite connections, the funding of prestigious universities, and the unanswered questions about what he truly knew all point to something far bigger than a single crime. If Epstein was just a financier, how did he move among presidents, royalty, and global power brokers? And what happened to the secrets he collected? Epstein may be gone, but the network around him remains, and accountability is still missing. That's why this case continues to haunt the public. because it forces us to question who really controls the system and whether truth is ever meant to fully come out. Want the full story and the details that rarely get discussed? Download the Skoob app now and listen to the complete episode, because some truths don't end when the investigation does.